On page 15, we'll start our second lesson with an explanation of sharps and flats. We've been playing all open natural notes, including open strings. Nothing with a sharp or flat before it. If we have a sharp before it, that would raise the note 1 fret. If I'm playing C on the second string, C sharp is the next fret. C is second string, first finger, first fret. C sharp is second string, second finger, second fret. F on the fourth string and the third fret, F sharp is the fourth fret with our fourth finger. Any open strings, the sharps are the first fret of that string. In other words, D, fourth string, open, D sharp, first fret, fourth string. G, open, third string, G sharp, third string, first fret. Flats move the note 1 fret lower, or 1 fret before what you would play that natural note. D on the third fret, second string, would be, D flat would be second fret. G, third fret, first string, G flat, second fret, first string. If you are going to flat any of the open strings, E, first string, E flat is the next string, the second string, fourth fret. If I were to play G, open, G flat is the next string, fourth fret. D, D flat, next string, fourth fret. A flat, fourth fret of the sixth string. The only open string that's different is B. The second string open, B flat is the third string, third fret. Okay, so E flat, B flat, G flat, D flat, A flat. So now look at the first line on page 15. I'll play it for you and look at my fingers, and then you should be practicing this. Right now I will do this without a metronome, so you can just concentrate on where the fingers are. But I'll count off a tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4. G, G sharp, A sharp, B, 2, 3, 4. B flat, that third. A flat, G, 2, 3, 4. Our next line, as it says in the book, when a sharp or a flat appears in the key signature, that is right in between the clef sign and the time signature, this sharp or flat is used throughout the entire piece. If you notice, we have a flat on B, so every B would be flatted in this example. I'll demonstrate. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, B flat, C, B flat, B flat, B flat, 2, 3, 4. I'll read exactly what it says next because it really explains it well. When a sharp or flat that is not in the key signature appears in the piece, it is called an accidental and is used only for the remainder of that one measure. The next bar line cancels it out. So if you look at that next example, we have C, B, A flat. Then the next measure, the third note we have is A. It's A natural because it's outside that bar measure. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Just an explanation of that again. In the second measure, first note we have a G, G sharp, A. Yes, the next note still is G sharp because it's in that measure. The next note, G, which is outside of the measure, would be G natural. So again, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. G sharp, 2, 3, 4. The natural sign is used to cancel out accidentals within the same measure. It is also used as a reminder that the bar line has canceled the accidental. So if we look at that first measure in the next line, G, G sharp, A, the only way to play G natural in that measure is to have a natural sign on G. The next measure, A sharp, B, G. It's not G sharp because that sharp was in the previous measure. Now we have an A natural, the next measure, as our first note. We don't need to put that natural sign there, but it's a good reminder. And if you notice, the reminders are always in parentheses. So it's A sharp, B, E. So that goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. A sharp, G natural. 2, 3, 4. When a natural sign is used to cancel a sharp or flat in the key signature, the cancellation is good only for the remainder of that measure. The same rule as when we add a sharp to the measure. It's only for that measure. So I'll play that line. 1, 2, 3, 4. That line, we're supposed to have B flats throughout the whole piece. In the first measure, the third note is a B natural, and that's only for that measure. So the next measure, the second measure, has a B flat in it. And then in order to play a B natural in the third measure, we have to have a natural sign. Again, I'll play it. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's important to look at my fingering with this because of the placement of the flats, especially the note B flat. Remember, it is on the third string, third finger. Now, this last exercise is a review of sharps and flats. Remember, sharps and flats that are not in the key signature only go for that one measure. So I'll put this one, I'll put the metronome on. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have C sharp in the second measure. We need to play C natural on the third beat. We need a natural sign. In the third measure, we have a C. We don't need a natural sign for that. Okay, and same thing goes for the E flat, the last note on the first line. And playing E natural happens naturally in the first measure of the second line, and so forth. Our next, we have a page. On page 16, we have a duet. Again, we'll go through the same procedure that we have been going through before. Here we go again. Duet, first guitar part. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's begin looking at this first part by looking at the form. Even if you're not looking at the form, you could hear the differences in different sections of the piece. We have, and that lasts 8 measures, and then it repeats again. So it's like an A part and another A part. Then on the 4th line, 3rd measure, we start hearing something different. That is the B part, and that goes all the way to the bottom of the page. And if we're listening again, we're going to hear the repeating of the theme. And that is, again, a repetition of our A part, but we have an ending in the last 4 measures, so it's a little different. So when you're looking at this piece, it's not as, how should I say, important that you think that everything is different from one thing to another. These themes repeat, and you can practice each theme, and it helps you with the next 8 measures. And you can start hearing the theme. Let's talk about playing this. A couple of things that are new here. One is on the 3rd measure of the 2nd line. We have on the 3rd beat 2 notes. The lowest note that are supposed to be played together, the lowest note is a G, and the highest note is an F. The G is on the 6th string, and the F is on the 4th string. So what happens to the 5th string? We have to mute it because we're using a pick. We're not going to be playing it like, if we do that, we're going to be hearing the 5th string, A. So what we do is lower our 3rd finger a little so that it's touching and muting the 5th string. Instead of, we're supposed to be hearing 2 notes. Let's see, all these chords are fairly repetitive from what we've been playing, except another chord on the 4th line, last measure. We have the note G, half note, 2 beats, and then we have B, F, and G playing together. And the best way to play these chords again with the right hand is to have the rest stroke. If you have the rest stroke happening, like I'm resting on the 3rd string, you will hear that melody note, G, louder than the rest of this other. Instead of you're hearing. We have some expression marks here, and it's the first time you're seeing on the second line, page 17, you have this coming out. That means get louder. That's called a crescendo. Crescendo means that you're playing at a normal, we're playing at our normal loudness, and with the lines going out means that we should be getting louder. And then on the last line, we have the opposite of that, meaning softer. So we're starting with the C chord, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. Try and emphasize it. In the last measure of this piece, we have a squiggly line going next to the chord. It's called a broken chord, and we're supposed to just glide our pick. We could emphasize it more by going, or a little faster. But it's definitely not, so it's. Also, we have the word retard in the next to the last measure. That means to gradually get slower. Right now, with the way I'm playing this as a duet, I am not going to observe that because I want you to keep a steady beat at first. And then when you play this duet with someone else, you can observe the retard sign. So now I would like you to practice this part. The second part of Here We Go Again duet has this actually the same form as the first part. We have this A, a different theme, but an A, B, A, and ending to this whole piece. So part 2, Here We Go Again. 1, 2, 3, 4. One of the hard parts of this second part is when we switch from our higher or middle register, let's say on line 3 of the bottom part. And then right from there in the second measure of the fourth line, we're jumping down to low C. So you might want to take those two measures of the first two measures of the fourth line, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're having problems with that, start with the last note on that first measure and practice the skip between the G and the C. Then both measures. The way to practice that works for me is that I play through a piece, I find the parts that I have problems with, and I start working on little sections at a time instead of always starting from the beginning and going to the end. Usually what happens with that is the beginning sounds great and you never really get to the end, and it's hard to put everything together. So it's practicing little bits and pieces of the parts and adding everything together. Again, we have this muted G, the G, the F, and the muted fifth string in the second part. In order to play that, we have to mute the fifth string. And as in the first part, we have to go from this to C and E. And I've had to practice this myself a number of times and just visualize the C and the E. So first, get used to play F to E, F to E, and then practice G to C. So you hear those parts. Visualize going to the C and D. The other part that's hard about this is that it's just one beat. We're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Practice half notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Quarter notes. 1, 2. Okay, now it's your turn to practice this piece. 1, 2, 3, 4. Page 17, the bottom of the page, rhythm accompaniment, bass note and chords. If you only see the letter name of a chord, that's a major chord. If a letter name followed by a 7, that's a dominant 7th chord. And for minor chords, it'll be a small M. But mostly this is a physical exercise that I want you to play and try and hold your hands down for the length of the time that it says hold for 2 beats with the C, and then we have a C chord. I would hold that C chord down for all 4 beats. This is to strengthen your hand. In addition to that, you should be noticing the names of the chords, and then you'll be able to relate that to any of the chord symbols we will see coming after this exercise. I will play this first, and then I'll explain some more. 1, 2, 3, 4. We will use rest strokes, especially after the bass notes that are being played, the low, so those come out stronger. That prepares you for the rest of the chord. Notice I'm not picking up my right hand. I'm playing C, and that's just letting it fall onto the 4th string, and we're prepared to play that next chord. Same thing, E, the next 3 strings. B, E. Now 3rd finger on F, we play those next 3. Then we put our 3rd finger on C, and we play the F chord with our 4th finger playing F. So it's, notice how I keep the first 3 strings held all the time. So, from the beginning. Now look at this. There we go. Hold the chord down. Hold the chord. Rest stroke. Rest stroke. Rest stroke. Rest stroke. To me, the hardest part of this is the last 2 measures where you have 1 beat for each chord. After the note D, then you have to prepare. And of course, throughout this book, Bill always reminds you, do not skip or slight any lesson material. I remember him telling me this all the time. We have a tendency to want to practice the parts that we know the best. Please practice the parts that are giving you the problems and get them up to a playing legato performance, and you will really improve even on the parts that come easy to you. So please keep practicing everything. Don't skip anything. This is really something that is a physical building up our physical strength and our dexterity with our left hand, and our navigation of our right hand comes with a lot of practice. So slow practice, legato practicing. Page 18, we start with 8th notes and playing 8th notes. If you remember, at the beginning of the book, we had at the bottom of the page, we talked about whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, and 8th notes. This is really the first time that we'll be playing 8th notes. 8th notes are worth a half a beat. So there are 2 8th notes per beat. So if this is 1, 2, 3, 4. 8th notes 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. As I demonstrated how to count the 8th notes, that's exactly how our right hand and our pick will be moving. down and up, what we call alternate picking. If you look at the page 18 at the top, it says, it shows the symbols for pick going downward. It's like going like this, and the V coming up, pick going upward. And I would call that alternate picking. And I would play eighth notes right now, practice all our eighth notes with alternate picking. You can practice starting playing eighth notes without even looking at the book by taking the scale that you know, the C scale. Let's play it from C to C. Remember the name of that exercise, C to C? And we're going to play 4 eighth notes for each note. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Your pick still rests on the string right above it. Notice how the pick rests. Okay. Another way to start practicing eighth notes is not only to repeat the note, but start switching the notes every eighth note, like this. This is a very difficult step if you haven't played alternate picking before. It's fairly easy because you always know where your right hand is and repeating the note for eighth notes, but to switch each note is a big jump from that. One and two and three and four and so start working on that, and especially we'll start one way is to play these exercises slowly, legato, in tempo, and being very, very diligent and trying to do this alternate picking. Exercise 1, page 18. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and. Sometimes when students are practicing eighth notes, they don't have problems with the eighth notes, they have problems with the quarter notes and keeping that as one full beat. So let's say we're on the second line, second measure of this exercise 1, it goes. Please give your quarter notes a full beat. And then eighth notes. I'll finish it. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exercise 2 is a bit harder. We're switching eighth notes on the end of 2 and the end of 4, which means you have to switch the note with an upstroke. It's easy when it's on the same string, but it's harder when it's on the next string. As in the first measure, we have C, D should be an upstroke. Not that, how should I say, emphasize. So the hardest part that you will have is switching strings when you have to play an upstroke. Exercise 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. If you notice, in the last note of this exercise, there's a sign over the note, and that's called a fermata. That means to hold. Actually, hold beyond its normal duration. So that is a quarter note. You can hold it for a half note. You can hold it for 3 beats. But the main thing is to hold it longer than what it would usually get. So. Exercise 3 on page 19 is a long exercise using all eighth notes. So I would suggest practicing this first in short 4 to 8 measure phrases. I would first practice the first 2 lines, which state the scale and how we're going to do this exercise. Each line after that starts on a different scale note using that same type of pattern. The third line starts with C. The fourth line starts on D. The next line starts on E. The next one F. G, and then the next line starts on A. And then the last 2 lines go. It's stay. So to summarize, the first 2 lines and the second 2 lines can stand on their own. I would practice those. Then after doing the first 2 lines, I would practice the third line by itself. I'm going through it quickly, so it's not taking as much time. Then after I would get that together, I would practice the next line. And so on. The main thing is to build up strength in the left hand, build coordination between both hands, and getting used to playing alternate picking. So let's play this fairly slowly. I will play this all the way through. Exercise 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice the fermata at the end of the piece on the note C. The next page, on page 20, is where we play our first duet with eighth notes incorporated. Here's part 1. One, 2, 3, 4. There are a number of things you have to watch out here for. One is timing, making sure you give the eighth notes the correct amount of beats, and also the quarter notes. Make sure you give the quarter notes the full beat and the eighth notes the half beat. The other thing is the switching between melody and chords, as in the first two measures. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a G7 chord, and I'm holding the note F, but after I play the D, again I'm doing a rest stroke and just playing the chord right after it, making it smoothly. Go back to the C chord. Alternate. On the third line, the first two measures, we have the C chord as we did in the previous page, going to the G7. Now we have these eighth notes. G, B, D, E, F. This is going to be the hardest part in the piece to play your alternate picking. Work at it, because we're going to have different choices to do different types of picking, but right now I want you to really concentrate on the alternate bit. Even if you have to do this first. So that third line goes like this. Alternate here. And the word below that C chord is fine, not fine. Fine meaning ending. Also, you might notice this is in two different parts. We have an A section that plays for the first two lines, and then we have more of a background in the last two lines. So now I would like you to practice part 1. Part 2 is really part 1 played the opposite way. We played the first, the background line in our first A part, and then we played the melody that we hear at the beginning from part 1, the last 8 measures. So really there isn't really anything new in the second part. Part 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. In the last line, there is a variation of the melody in the bottom part, but it's all basically the same. We're in the key of C using eighth notes and chords. So please remember to use the alternate picking. Play it slowly, keep everything in time, and play it with legato phrasing, long phrasing. One, two, three, four. Page 21, rests, tied notes, dotted notes. A rest is a period of silence. It is as much a part of the music as playing a note. Sometimes it is harder to keep your place in playing a rest than it is in playing notes. And we'll come to that when we play some duets using rests. On the top of the page, it has listed the common time value of rests. There's a whole note rest, a half note rest, quarter note rest, eighth note rest. Also, it's known as an eighth rest, a quarter rest, a half rest, and a whole rest. As a whole note gets 4 beats, a whole rest is a rest of 4 beats. Same thing goes, half note, 2 beats, half rest, 2 beats, quarter note, 1 beat, eighth note, half a beat. So notice what they look like. Notice that the whole rest is hanging from the line, and the half rest is laying on top of a line. Next, tied notes. I'll read this because it's said very well. When 2 tied notes are tied together with a curved line, only the first is picked. The second note is merely held and counted. What you're doing is adding the amount of beats a note should be getting. So in that exercise here we have C, a whole note, tied to a quarter note, C. That note would get 5 beats. The G in the third measure gets 2 beats plus the 1 beat that it's tied to in the last measure. When counting, I would always count in the numbers that correspond to the number of beats there are in the measure. In other words, when I'm playing the C, I'm not going to be going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would be going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Dotted notes. A dot placed after a note increases the time value of that note by 1/2. In other words, if you have a dotted half note, the value of that note is 2 plus 1, 3 beats. You really don't have to figure this out after a while. You just know that a dotted half note gets 3 beats. A dotted quarter note gets 1.5 beats. So let's look at the exercise right under the dotted note. And it's played like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you look at the line right below that, that is an example of how that first line is played with tied notes. Takes up much more room, and to me is more confusing. So that's why I get used to looking at dotted notes and reacting to the right number of beats. I will play now the exercise at the bottom of the page. I won't turn on the metronome because I will count out loud for you. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The next page, page 22, is the last page of this lesson. It really is a review of eighth notes in different areas of the C scale in the first position. I'll play part 1. This is Etude number 2, duet. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's always good to look at the piece before you start playing, as I've mentioned before. What I would like you to notice right now are the rhythms of the piece before you start. If you notice, we have quarter notes and eighth notes. The first phrase and that phrase is developed for 8 measures. Our second phrase is on the third line that goes and that's developed for the next 8 measures, and then we have the restatement of the theme in the last 4 measures. The other thing that I would notice in this, when I'm looking at it, is that in the first 8 measures, we mostly go stepwise. In other words, no skip notes. C, D, E, F, G, and then consecutive eighth notes that are next to each other. In the next 8 measures, we have more of a melody that skips around. So when I'm first looking at this piece of music, I would look at that, and I would notice that and prepare for that while I'm playing. When you're playing a piece for a number of times and that you know it, you are always looking ahead when you're playing. Etude number 2, part 2. When you're looking at part 2, you might say, I start off very easy. I have 3 measures of rest and 1 beat rest all at the beginning. I don't have to play anything. I can just relax. Well, this is the time you have to concentrate the most. This is when you have to count and know where the beats are, know exactly where 1, 2, 3, 4 are, keep a steady count, and come in strong when you play. It's one of the harder things to do in music. So what I would be doing when I'm counting this, I would be going, for the first 3 measures, I'd be going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay? When you're counting and waiting to come in, you should be ready to play any time. You shouldn't have your hands down. You should be ready as if you're playing the notes. That's how you're resting. Here's part 2. I'll be counting the tempo out loud, and then I will count to myself the first 3 measures. 1, 2, 3, 4. And make sure you stop and you rest on the 4th beat of the last measure. That's very important. It shouldn't be hanging over. There's a quarter rest there. So you could either release the notes with the left hand, release that pressure, or you could stop the ringing of the notes with your right hand. And what I do is I use the fatty portion over here of my hand, and I just touch it. Using the right hand is especially good when you have open strings. Or you could also stop it with your left hand. The main thing is when you stop the notes, you do not move out of position with either left hand or right hand. In the last measure of the first line, you have G, G, F. The fingering has it that you would be playing the F with your 4th finger, and then going to the 2nd finger on E in the next line. This creates a legato sound. If we went from 3 to 3, it would be from G with your 3rd finger to F with your 3rd finger. It would be not as legato. Listen to this. 1. That's with the 3rd finger. Here's with the 4th finger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And the reason why we're doing this is to get used to using different fingers in different situations so that we can make good choices and get used to playing things differently so we can make a musical choice when we're playing any piece of music. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the end of lesson 2. I would suggest that you would go back, review the accidentals, sharps and flats, go over eighth notes, play them very slowly, and then play the duets, and review the material on rests, dotted notes, and tied notes.